Ghana's President Mahama have been selected as the first vice of the Africa Union Assembly Bureau. That means that he's gone up one step in the Africa Union Bureau food chain. So yeah, last year President Mahama was the second vice of the Africa Union Bureau. This year he is the first vice, which almost guarantees that next year he's going to be the chair of the Africa Union. I'm going to break down how all of this work for you on this channel. My name is Nenebi Tony. I'm a Ghanaian writer who lives in the US. On this channel, I talk about geopolitics and trade from the perspective of an African. And so if you like intellectual conversations, subscribe to this channel. So I'm recording this in my room because it's a very rainy Valentine's Day in Texas, USA, where I live, just like it is rainy in, what was the name? In Ghana. And so because the roads are slippery because of how wet it is outside, be careful how you walk and where you enter this rainy day. Okay, let's get back to the serious business. So the Africa Union leadership has a structure, right? They have the Africa Union Assembly, which is the assembly of the heads of states and government who represent the members of the Africa Union. Remember, membership of Africa Union is to the country. So the countries of Africa are the members of the Africa Union, not the leaders of the countries themselves. So the leaders of these countries form the assembly of the African Union, and they are the higher decision-making body of the union. And the assembly also have a bureau. You know the word bureau means office in French. So the assembly also have the bureau called the African Union Assembly Bureau. And the bureau is led by five heads of states. So they have the chair, the first vice, second vice, third vice, and the rapporteur. Well, how do they pronounce that? Is it rapporteur? Let me see. Yeah, rapporteur. So as it stands now, the person who is elected to be the chair of the Africa Union is the president of Burundi. And I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to disrespect him by saying his name wrong. So the president of Burundi has been elected as the vice of the African Union. And I'm using the word elected loosely because usually the leadership of the African Union is not necessarily an election based. I mean, the bureau is not necessarily an election based. They unanimously appoint somebody. So he last year was the first vice. And even though he was the first vice, there were rumors going around that the president of DR Congo was going to be the AU chair instead of Burundi. And why is that? So the AU chairship is rotational, right? So each year, one of the regions of Africa will have a leader from that region lead the Africa Union. So last year, Southern Africa stand to lead was. So the president of Angola was the AU chair. And this year in 2026, it is the turn of Central Africa to lead. And that is how the president of Burundi became the chair. But last year, even though he was the first vice, there were a lot of rumors going around that the president of DR Congo, who is very respected, and DR Congo is the biggest country in Central Africa. So people thought that he was going to be the chair. But it looks like the leaders of Africa decided to just follow the rotation and then make Burundi the president of Burundi the chair. And last year, the president of Ghana was the second vice. And this year, he's moved to the first vice. And this is important that the same thing that happened with Burundi is going to happen with Mahama because of this. So the Western Africa, we have our regional body called ECOWAS. And last year in December, ECOWAS unanimously endorsed President Mahama as the person to be the AU chair when it is our turn in 2027. So first, the I think the foreign ministers of ECOWAS appointed him, unanimously endorsed him, and then the head of states unanimously endorsed him. And so, as he has the endorsement of his region, he's definitely going to be the chair. That is why he's now the first vice, rotation basis. And when he becomes the chair in 2027, that will be the first time a president of Ghana is leading Africa in 20 years, because the last president of Ghana to lead the AU was President Kufuor in 2007. And so in 2007, President Kufuor became the second president of Ghana to lead Africa and the first president of Ghana to lead the AU. And why am I distinguishing between the two? You remember before 2002, there was OAU, Organization of African Unity, and the president of Ghana at the time, the first president of Ghana, President Nkrumah, was the chairperson of OAU from 1965 to 1966 when he was overthrown. So when he was overthrown, Ankara, who overthrown him, took over his chairpersonship, because remember, the membership is to the country. So Ankara automatically took over the chairpersonship. And then, so because of the way things have changed in Africa, technically, Mahama would be the fourth Ghanaian president to be the chair. But from 2000, Africa have changed how it admits countries. What do I mean by this? Before 2000, coup d'etats were commonplace in Africa, and so the OAU did not interfere in coup d'etats. So if your country's leader is overthrown, the military leader who takes over automatically become a member of the OAU. And then in 2000, they had a Lome Declaration to make it compulsory that there is a constitutional transfer of power in Africa. And so, if there is a disruption in your country's structure, you'll be kicked out of, you'll be suspended from AU. And then, if you go back to the right thing, then you'll be readmitted. So, as it stands now, countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Sudan, and who else? Yes, Sudan. I'm trying to see if there is somebody else I'm leaving out. Guinea used to be suspended, but now Guinea has a president who is democratically elected, even though he was a coup leader. So now I believe Guinea will be readmitted back into the AU. So as it stands now, these four countries are the countries I can remember on top of my head who have been suspended from AU. That is important because of this. The Sahel countries have been suspended from AU and have been suspended from ECOWAS. So the reason why they formed the alliance of the Sahel, which people are commending them for, is not because they want to, it's because they need to. As a country, you cannot be an island. You need to have friendship with other countries. And Africa is not willing to endorse the leaders of the Sahel who are coup leaders, because Africa these days mandatorily want to have constitutional rule. And Africa do not interfere in how the constitution in your country runs. So the president of Cameroon, Uganda, and Tanzania, who are manipulating the laws of their country to stay in power for so long, we don't care, as long as there is a right framework that your country is following. When you do not have a framework that your country is following, that is when you get suspended. So if tomorrow Ibrahim Traore decides to hold an election and they rig the election and wins, he will be eligible to be admitted back into the African Union. And personally, in as much as democracy in Africa is not perfect, I prefer the position of AU over the old position, because at least it guarantees that people who are reasonable people will do the right thing. Of course, power corrupts. So there are going to be leaders like the leaders of the countries I mentioned, Cameroon, Uganda, Tanzania, who are going to manipulate the system to stay in power, even Ivory Coast, who are going to manipulate the system to stay in power. But as long as you are manipulating the system based on infrastructure and institution, we stay out. You understand? So I just wanted to highlight that. So from next year, the president of Ghana would be the chair of AU. That's what it looks like. And that has been the case when he went to the AU meeting. Yesterday, he had the AU, was it? I think earlier today. He had the AU Addis Ababa convening of the Accra Reset, where he had other leaders of Africa meet up to discuss his view of the future of Africa with the leaders. And there are a lot of things he talked about that I've already made videos on them because I've been following the president of Ghana for like a year now in terms of his international, agenda. So I knew exactly what he was going to talk about. And so I've made a video on what he talks about free movement and then the bringing back of Africa's repatriation of Africa's foreign reserve back to Africa. So I'll put them at the end of this video so you can watch to understand where the president of Ghana is coming from. I don't want to break down the speech that he gave because I've already touched on the issues that he talked about in his speech. All right. If there's only thing that I didn't touch on was the thing of gender. He said that he talked about why African leaders need to be more proactive in the issues of gender. And then he said that the president of Ghana, in a few years, could be a woman. That is very interesting for domestic politics purposes in Ghana because the current vice president of Ghana is a woman. And very soon, the party which the president is from is going to have their primary to elect their flag bearer. What I think the president of Ghana indirectly communicated to Africa is he's not going to seek a third term, which is good to hear because members of his party have been being insanely stupid talking about the president of Ghana need to run for a third term. That is very stupid talk. Ghana is one of the oldest democracy in Africa. We need to keep it that way. So the fact that he indirectly shut down those talk without directly, going at the members of his party, I thought that was smart and diplomatic on his behalf, and also indirectly communicating to the people in his party that he wants his vice to be the leader of the party. That's also very interesting how he did it. That's how what I understood President Mahama saying Ghana can have a woman president in a short while to mean. That's what I took from it. Maybe that's what he intended to say. I just wanted to share with you where we are so far in the issue of the AU summit. If something interesting else comes up, I would make another video to break it down for you. And subscribe to my channel if you like intellectual conversations about the place of Ghana on the world stage.